The stone remembered. It remembered the songs of hammers, the heat of forges, the laughter that once rang against its ribs. But now it remembered silence more keenly than sound. The halls of Erebor stood hollow, every echo a ghost that refused to fade. Beneath the carved arches, Thrain, son of Doruk, walked alone. His boots struck the stone like a gavel passing judgment. The air was heavy with the dust of centuries, motes drifting like pale sparks in the gloom. Once, this was the Mountain of Kings. Now it was a tomb where the last dwarf carried the burden of all the rest. He stopped at the Hall of Names. Along its walls ran endless lines of runes, each one a life, a lineage, a story chiseled into permanence. Thrain ran his calloused fingers across the cold grooves. The names of his father, his brothers, his kin, all here, all silent. He wanted to add his own, to carve it while he still drew breath, but the thought curdled in his stomach. He was not ready to accept an ending, even if it had already come. The stillness broke with a sound no stone had ever made. A whisper. Not in his ear, not in the air, but in the marrow of the mountain itself. It was the voice of ancestors, distant and mournful, weaving together words that bent his heart. Go east. The shadow wakes. Thrain froze. He had heard voices before, in dreams, in grief, but never like this, never with the weight of command. He turned sharply as if expecting to see a figure behind him, but only the endless carved walls stared back. The whisper lingered, pressing against his skull. He gripped the haft of his axe, its head dulled by years without battle. I swore I would never leave, he muttered, voice breaking against the emptiness. I swore I would guard what remains. The stone answered not with words, but with a long, low tremor that rattled the dust from the ceiling. Somewhere deep in Erebor's bones, something stirred, something older than grief, older than stone itself. Thrain's chest tightened. He looked once more at the names carved in the wall. Then I will carry you with me, he whispered, and for the first time in decades, he turned his back on the mountain's heart. The great gate groaned as he heaved it open, a sound like the world itself sighing. The wind beyond cut sharp against his face, carrying with it the sting of snow and the faint stench of smoke. He stepped out into the night, and Erebor's shadow stretched long behind him. The land had changed. Pines once green stood skeletal, their bark split and blackened as if scorched from within. The river that had once glittered silver under moonlight now crawled sluggish and dark, flecked with an oily sheen. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, their light smothered by a haze that had no source. Thrain marched into it, the mountain at his back, the unknown before him. By dawn, frost crackled across his beard. The sun struggled to break through the mist, pale and weak. As he descended into a hollow where the trees nodded into a canopy, the air grew thick, heavy with a pressure that pressed against his chest. It was there he heard the snap of a bowstring. An arrow thunked into the ground before his boots, quivering. Thrain stopped, his hand already on his axe, eyes scanning the trees. A voice, smooth and steady, rang out. Strange, to see a dwarf wander alone when the world itself is closing its doors. From the shadow stepped a figure tall, cloaked in gray, hair like spun silver catching what little light pierced the branches. An elf. Their bow remained half-drawn, the arrow knocked but not loosed. Thrain squared his shoulders. And stranger still, to see an elf who thinks a warning shot earns him courtesy. The elf's lips curved faintly. Courtesy is earned by surviving the second shot. I am Ilarion. These woods are no longer safe, dwarf. Even shadows have teeth here. I need no keeper. Perhaps not. But the east will devour even the proud. Best that you do not face it alone. Before Thrain could answer, a rustling came from deeper in the wood. A boy stumbled forward, clutching a bough far too large for his frame. His clothes were torn, his face pale, but his eyes burned with a determination far older than his years. My name is Kalen, he gasped. I followed them, men in black helms, or things wearing men. They serve a darkness moving east. If you are who I think you are, the last dwarf of Erebor, then your road is not yours alone. Thrain stared at them both, elf and boy, strangers bound to him by fate rather than choice. He wanted to turn away, to vanish back into his grief. But the mountain's whisper still coiled in his ears, eastward, eastward. He tightened his grip on the axe. Walk with me if you will. But know this, safety is behind us. What waits ahead has no mercy. The elf knocked an arrow. The boy straightened despite the tremor in his legs. Together, they turned east. And somewhere, unseen, the shadow stirred. The forest pressed closer with every step. What had once been greenwood was now a gaunt carcass of itself, branches clawing overhead, roots twisting like bones beneath the earth. The little light that pierced the canopy came fractured and gray, as though the sky itself recoiled from this place. Thrain trudged ahead, axe slung over his shoulder, his breath clouding in the chilled air. Behind him, Ilarion moved with quiet ease, bow loose in hand, every motion deliberate. Kalen followed last, shoulders hunched, eyes darting, his bow too heavy for his thin arms yet held with the defiance of someone who had lost too much to turn back. Hours stretched long without speech. It was Ilarion who finally broke the silence. You listen to the stone even when there is no stone to speak, the elf observed. Why? Thrain did not glance back. Stone remembers. It holds truth better than air or wood. When the stone speaks, you do not doubt it. And what does it whisper now? Thrain hesitated. The whisper still gnawed at him, urging east, east, east. That the ground itself is sick, he muttered. That we are walking into its belly. Kalen stumbled over a root, catching himself on a tree trunk. His face was pale, but set with grim determination. Then, let's cut out the sickness before it spreads. The dwarf looked at him for the first time since dawn. You speak as though courage is enough. The boy's jaw clenched. If I don't, who will? The words hit harder than they should have. Thrain turned away quickly, hiding the ache they stirred. He remembered his younger brothers speaking like that, bold, foolish, too alive to imagine silence. Now their names lived only on the walls of Erebor. By nightfall, they found a clearing where no bird sang. A circle of earth lay bare in its center, blackened as if scoured by flame though no ash remained. They made camp at its edge. The fire Kalen built sputtered low, reluctant to burn the damp wood he gathered. Its light carved hollows under his eyes. Ilarion sat sharpening an arrowhead, movements calm, measured. Thrain kept his axe across his knees, gaze fixed on the dark. It was Kalen who finally spoke, voice quiet, almost apologetic. I was the last in my village to leave. Everyone else fled west when the sickness came. I stayed to help my father. But his throat worked, words catching. The black-helmed men came. He told me to run. I haven't seen him since. The silence that followed was heavier than the forest itself. Ilarion looked at the boy, eyes softening, though their voice was cool. Loss binds us faster than blood. Thrain said nothing, though the words scraped against something raw inside him. He shifted the axe, gripping it tighter. That night, sleep came uneasily. The whisper returned stronger, not words this time but a rhythm, hammer blows echoing in his skull. He dreamt of Erebor's throne, no longer empty but waiting, a crown glimmering in the dark. He saw himself seated upon it, armies kneeling, enemies broken. A voice, sharp as steel, curled around the vision. You are the last. Take what remains. Rule, or be forgotten. He woke with a start, sweat chilling his skin. The fire had died. Ilarion kept watch, their bow strung, eyes reflecting faint starlight. You dream loud, the elf said without looking at him. Thrain grunted. The mountain remembers too much. Ilarion's lips twitched into something that might have been pity. Be wary. Memory is a chain as much as a guide. At dawn, they pressed on. The land worsened. Streams bled black, the stench of iron fouling the air. Once they passed the carcass of a stag, its flesh warped as though melted, antlers twisted into cruel spirals. Kalen gagged, but Thrain forced himself to look. This was no ordinary corruption. This was well-made rot. By midday, they reached the edge of a gorge. Across its span, a bridge of stone stretched precariously, cracked and trembling above an abyss so deep it seemed bottomless. The raven sat upon the broken arch, watching. Thrain felt the whisper surge again, urgent now, pressing against his ribs like a hand. East. East. The bridge was the only way. Ilarion's eyes narrowed. This is no path made for mortals. It is a test. Kaelin swallowed hard, staring at the drop. Do we have a choice? Thrain tightened his grip on the axe. We never did. And with that, he set his foot upon the bridge. The stone groaned beneath him, echoing like a warning. The bridge stretched like a scar across the abyss, its stones cracked and uneven, its supports hidden in shadow. Wind rose from below, cold and unearthly, as if the chasm exhaled the memory of everything it had ever swallowed. Thrain led the way, boots grinding against stone that trembled beneath his weight. Ilarion followed with silent poise, bow half drawn, while Kaelin trailed close behind, his breaths quick, eyes locked on the ground to avoid the endless dark yawning beneath them. Halfway across, the whispers returned. Not faint, not subtle. This time they struck like hammers against the inside of Thrain's skull. Leave them. Cast them aside. You are the last, alone you will endure, together you will fall. He staggered, gripping the axe tighter, the runes along its head glowing faintly blue. A vision flared, himself standing on the far side of the gorge alone, unburdened by companions, crowned by the memory of his people. Behind him, the bridge cracked, Ilarion and Kaelin plummeting into the abyss. No grief, only release. Thrain's chest tightened. His knuckles whitened against the haft. For a breath too long, he wanted it. Thrain. Ilarion's voice cut sharp through the vision. The elf's hand was on his arm, steadying him. You faltered. He forced his gaze forward. The stone is speaking. No, Ilarion said grimly. That is not stone. That is something else. Before Thrain could answer, a horn blast split the air. From the far side of the gorge, black-helmed soldiers emerged, their armor jagged and glinting with a red glow from within. At their head strode Culver, the figure from Kaelin's warnings, his armor cracked like cooling magma, his obsidian blade humming with a resonance that made the bridge itself shudder. Kaelin froze. How did they? They were waiting, Thrain growled. The soldiers advanced onto the bridge, formation tight. Arrows hissed from Ilarion's bow, dropping two, but the line did not break. The span shook under the weight of so many feet. Run, Thrain barked. They sprinted, the abyss yawning on either side. Kaelin stumbled, but Ilarion hauled him forward, swift as shadow. The soldiers gained ground, their footfalls like war drums. Then Culver raised his blade. A shockwave ripped through the bridge, fissures splitting stone. Chunks of rock sheared away, plunging into the dark. Kaelin cried out as the ground beneath him cracked. Ilarion caught his wrist just in time, hauling him back. Arrows flew, striking soldier after soldier, but still they came. Thrain turned, planting his boots, axe raised. Go, both of you. Ilarion's eyes narrowed. Not without, now. The elf hesitated, then dragged Kaelin toward the far side. Culver closed the distance, his blade raised high. His voice carried like a chorus of echoes. The axe belongs to the shadow. You are not strong enough to deny it. Their weapons met with a shattering crash. Sparks flew into the dark, swallowed before they could fall. Culver pressed hard, his strength more than mortal. The whisper surged again, feeding the doubt already gnawing inside Thrain. He is right. You cannot win. Yield. Give me the fight. I will crush him for you. For a heartbeat, Thrain wavered. The axe pulsed eager, alive. If he let go not with his hands, but with his will, the weapon would claim the battle. And him. On the far side, Kaelin shouted. His young voice cracked but carried, raw with desperation. Don't leave us, Thrain. The words struck deeper than Culver's blade. Memory flooded back, the hall of names, the walls carved with the dead, the vow he made never to let their story end in silence. If he yielded now, he would not be carrying their memory. He would be erasing it. With a roar, Thrain shoved Culver back, sparks cascading. He swung the axe low, striking not the man but the bridge beneath them. Stone split, groaned, and gave way. Culver staggered as the span crumbled, soldiers tumbling screaming into the abyss. The general clung to the edge, ember eyes burning with hatred. This is not the end, dwarf. The shadow waits for you. Then the stone beneath him broke, and he fell into the chasm, swallowed by endless dark. The last of the soldiers plunged after. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of collapsing stone echoing into infinity. Thrain staggered to the far side, breath ragged, shoulders heavy. Ilarion and Kaelin stood waiting, eyes wide. Kaelin's voice shook. You almost— Thrain cut him off, his voice raw. I know. The whisper inside him had gone quiet, but its silence was not peace. It was patience. And Thrain understood now, the battle was not with Culver. The true enemy was already in his hands. The gorge lay silent behind them, its broken bridge swallowed in mist. Yet Thrain could not shake the sound of Culver's voice as he fell. The shadow waits for you. They pressed eastward, the land twisting darker with each mile. Trees bled sap the color of tar. Stones cracked underfoot, seeping a faint red glow. The very air felt thin, as though the world's breath had been stolen. Kaelin lagged, wincing with every step, but refused to complain. His face was pale, jaw clenched in determination that seemed borrowed from someone older. Ilarion kept pace at his side, quiet but watchful, every arrow they loosed to hunt snapping into the earth as if even beasts had abandoned this place. On the third night, they camped in the hollow of a ruined watchtower, its stones sagging like the spine of a dead giant. Thrain sat apart from the fire, the relic axe across his knees, runes glowing faintly in the dark. Ilarion approached, lowering themselves beside him. You strike like a storm, yet you look like a man already broken. Thrain kept his eyes on the axe. Because I am both. The elf studied him a moment, then spoke softly. I saw it on the bridge. You almost yielded. If not for the boy's voice, you might have let the axe take you. Thrain's grip tightened. You think I don't know? It sings every time I touch it. Not a song I can silence. Ilarion's voice sharpened. Then cast it away. The dwarf turned, eyes blazing. And leave us defenseless? That weapon is the only reason Culver fell. The shadow does not arm its foes without reason, Ilarion retorted. It wants you to wield it. It wants to break you. Silence stretched between them. The fire cracked. Kaelin stirred in his sleep, murmuring his father's name. At last, Thrain muttered, if breaking me keeps the shadow from breaking the world, perhaps that is a price worth paying. Ilarion's hand shot out, gripping his arm. No. If you fall, we all fall. This is not your burden alone, Thrain. Stop pretending it is. The dwarf's chest heaved. He wanted to argue, to insist that being last meant solitude, that no one else could carry the weight of Erebor. But the word stuck, brittle in his throat. The next morning, they reached the ridge that overlooked the valley. What they saw hollowed them. The valley was fire. Entire villages smoldered, black smoke curling upward into a sky so heavy with shadow it seemed about to collapse. Shapes moved through the blaze, black-helmed soldiers marching in disciplined lines, their armor glowing with the same molten fissures as Culver's had. At their center, a great circle of stone had been carved into the earth, runes blazing red. And there, standing tall, impossibly whole, was Culver. His body was cracked, charred, yet alive, as if the abyss had not consumed him but reforged him. His ember eyes locked on the ridge as if he had been waiting. Kaelin gasped. He should be dead. No, Ilarion murmured grimly. He has become more than himself. The shadow wears him now. Thrain's chest turned to stone. The axe pulsed against his palm, runes flaring, eager. The whisper returned, smoother than ever, now. Take him. Strike, and they will kneel. Rule through fear, and the world will never forget the last of Erebor. He staggered, sweat chilling his brow. He could almost see it, himself descending into the valley, the axe raised, the soldiers falling to their knees. No more loneliness. No more forgotten names. A kingdom reborn, even if it was born in chains. Kaelin's voice cut through the vision, trembling but fierce. If we run now, the fire spreads. My father, my people, none of them will ever come home. He looked at Thrain with wide, desperate eyes. You carry the weight of a mountain, but you're not carrying it alone. Not anymore. Ilarion's gaze burned, steady as stone. Choose, Thrain. fight for us or fight for yourself. One path saves the world. The other damns it. Thrain's hands shook around the axe. The whispers screamed, promising everything he had ever wanted. Behind his eyes, he saw the Hall of Names again, but this time, the runes were glowing, alive, as if his fallen kin were watching. He clenched his jaw. His voice came out low, raw. Then let the shadow test me. But I will not wear its crown. He rose, axe gleaming, and began the descent into the burning valley. The ground quaked beneath their feet. The soldiers turned as one. Culver raised his blade, runes blazing brighter. The sky darkened, shadow pressing closer like a vast lid sealing shut. The final stand had begun, the valley screamed. Fire surged in spirals around the runed circle, spilling across the scorched fields. Soldiers in black helms marched with mechanical precision, their armor splitting with cracks of molten light. At the center, Culver stood like a statue of living fire, his obsidian blade humming with a sound that seemed to claw the inside of every ear. Thrain stepped onto the ruined plain. Each boot fall felt heavier than the last, as though the ground resisted him. Ilarion and Kaelin followed close, their shadows stretched long against the blood-red glow. The axe pulsed in Thrain's hands. Its runes blazed, drinking in the heat, eager for blood. The whispers surged so loud they were nearly a song. Strike him down. Take his throne. The world will kneel. The last of Erebor shall be remembered. Thrain's breath came ragged. His grip faltered. He wanted it, by stone and steel. He wanted it to matter. To make the silence end. Then Culver's voice rose, layered, monstrous. Dwarf. You are already mine. One step more, and the shadow claims you. The ground cracked. Soldiers surged forward. Arrows hissed from Ilarion's bow, cutting the line. Kaelin loosed shaft after shaft, his arms trembling, each arrow a defiance against terror. Thrain roared and swung. The axe held as it cleaved through helms, scattering sparks and bone. Each blow fed the whispers louder, sweeter. Yes. More. Let them fear you. But fear was a chain, and he felt it tighten with every strike. Culver strode through the flames, blade raised. The ground bent beneath him, stones cracking like brittle glass. His ember eyes locked on Thrain. You are no heir, you are my herald. Their weapons met with a crash that shook the valley. The shockwave flung ash and fire into the air. Thrain staggered back, knees buckling, axe vibrating with fury. Culver pressed forward, every strike heavier than the last. The obsidian blade sang like a dirge, demanding surrender. Thrain gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. The whispers pressed harder. Kill him. Claim his place. Rule the army. Your name will echo forever. For an instant, he saw it, armies kneeling, Erebor alive again, his kin's voices raised in song. Not out of love, but fear. A kingdom remade from ash. A crown of chains. And he almost reached for it. Thrain. Kaelin's cry broke the vision. The boy had driven his last arrow into a soldier's throat. A blade struck him in return, slashing across his side. He fell with a gasp, blood soaking the earth. The world narrowed. Thrain's chest tore open with grief, rage, shame. He saw the boy's face, pale but defiant. He heard his voice from the ridge. You don't carry it alone. Something inside him cracked, not his will, but the lie he had lived by. He was not last. He was not alone. Not while even one voice called his name. He bellowed, a roar that split the air. Culver raised his blade for the killing stroke, and Thrain drove the axe into the ground. The runes exploded with light. The valley split open, stones shrieking, fire rushing upward in geysers. Soldiers toppled, swallowed by collapsing earth. The shockwave tore the circle apart, shattering the ritual, severing the shadow's grip. Culver staggered. His armor cracked wide, ember light spilling like blood. No, you were mine. Thrain rose from the ash, eyes burning with something older than fear. I was never yours. With a final swing, he cleaved the axe through Culver's chest. The obsidian blade shattered. Culver's ember eyes flared wide, then extinguished. His body collapsed into ash, scattered on the wind. The valley fell silent. The fire dimmed. The soldiers crumbled. The shadow above recoiled, torn from its vessel, retreating into the horizon with a scream like tearing sky. Thrain dropped to his knees. The axe glowed faintly, then dimmed, its whispers falling silent, not defeated, but waiting. Ilarion rushed to Kaelin's side, cradling the boy in their arms. Thrain staggered forward, dread heavier than steel. Kaelin's eyes fluttered open. He tried to speak, but blood flecked his lips. Thrain grasped his hand, voice breaking. "Hold on. You're stronger than this." The boy's gaze found him, soft but steady. "You didn't leave us." Thrain's throat clenched. He bowed his head. "Never." Kaelin smiled faintly. Then his eyes closed. His chest fell still. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ilarion lowered his head, shoulders shaking. The fireless wind moved through the valley, carrying ash away. Thrain knelt beside the boy, axe across his knees. For the first time, he wept openly, the sound raw and ancient, echoing across the broken valley. He had won. But victory had never felt so much like loss. The valley was quiet now. Smoke drifted in slow ribbons over the charred ground, coiling around cairns of broken stone. Where once soldiers in black helms had marched, there was only ruin, their armor scattered like shells of insects burned hollow. The ritual circle lay shattered, runes cracked and lifeless. The air, though heavy with ash, no longer carried the weight of the shadow's presence. But silence was not peace. Thrain stood with the axe planted in the soil, his shoulders bowed. The runes along the blade still pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something that had only been forced into slumber. His calloused hands trembled against the haft. He feared letting go and feared holding on. A few paces away, Kaelin's cairn rose from the earth. The stones had been stacked with care, each one chosen by Ilarion's steady hands. At the top lay the boy's bow, snapped in two, a symbol of both his defiance and his end. Thrain had carved runes into the topmost stone. They read, "Here lies Kaelin, who carried more than his years, and who made courage out of fear." The words blurred as Thrain's eyes burned. He had carved countless names before, but this one felt different. This one was not the echo of a distant past. It was fresh, raw, the kind of wound no stone could heal. Ilarion stood beside the cairn, their bows slung across their back, their gaze fixed east. Their face was calm, but grief sharpened their voice. "The shadow recoils, but it is not gone." This was a battle, not the war. Thrain nodded slowly. "I know. And you?" The elf's eyes flicked to the axe, still glowing faintly. "Will you be the one to carry its burden? Or will it be the one to carry you?" The dwarf looked down at the weapon. Its silence pressed heavier than its whispers ever had. He remembered the visions, the crown, the armies, the endless kneeling. A future carved in chains. He remembered the temptation, how close he had come to yielding. And he remembered Kaelin's last words, "You didn't leave us." He lifted the axe, weighing it, then drove it deeper into the ground until half the haft vanished into soil. For a long moment he stared at it, his breath unsteady. Finally, he spoke, "I will carry you. But you will not carry me." The runes flickered, faint and restless, as though the weapon understood. Elrond's hand touched his shoulder. "Then you must be prepared. The shadow will rise again. And when it does, it will know your name." Thrain let out a humorless laugh, low and tired. "Let it. I am weary of being forgotten." They left the valley together at dusk. Behind them, the cairn stood small yet unyielding, a lone sentinel among the ruins. The raven circled once overhead, then perched upon the stones, silent witness to the oath carved there. As they climbed the ridge, the horizon shifted. The east was still dark, still restless. Clouds coiled unnaturally, swallowing starlight. The shadow had not ended. It had only been denied. At the crest, Thrain paused. He looked back once more at the valley, the cairn, the ruins, the ashes that still smoldered. "We are only stone," he murmured, recalling the words etched deep into his memory, "but stone holds best when others lean on it." Elrond met his gaze. "And who will lean on you, last dwarf of Erebor?" Thrain's answer came after a long silence. "Whoever dares walk beside me." They pressed on. The road ahead was jagged, scarred by fire, but each step felt less like exile and more like defiance. Thrain carried not only the axe, but also the memory of the boy who had believed in him, the elf who had challenged him, and the countless voices of his kin carved into the Hall of Names. Night deepened. Stars broke through where the clouds thinned, fragile and distant. Thrain lay awake beside the dying fire, the axe within reach, his gaze fixed eastward. Sleep eluded him, but resolve held firm. The shadow was patient. So was stone,